Hi, welcome to the All Things LGBTQ interview show, where we interview LGBTQ guests who are making important contributions to our communities.
All Things LGBTQ is taped at Orca Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize as being unceded Indigenous land.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
So, this is the beginning of our election year, and people are stepping forward to announce their candidacy for both House and Senate seats here in Vermont. And there is a candidate who has announced recently their intention to represent Franklin 6, and you just saw her briefly on the screen. Please welcome back to All Things LGBTQ, Brenda Churchill.
Thanks, Keith. It's nice to be here.
So I want to start with, how is it that you came to Vermont and live in the district for which you are now running for a House seat?
Thanks, Keith. I moved up here over 30 years ago from Central New York. One of my best friends from college had started a machining and manufacturing business in St. Albans, and I came up here to assist and drive some sales through their door, and eventually what was a very successful machining and manufacturing business. So my experience with machining and manufacturing from Syracuse and my knowledge of the area became very important to soliciting new clients. We had clients that ranged from Stowe Mountain Resort to other manufacturing businesses in the area, including Biotech and Yankee Tool. And we just kept expanding on that. It was a good relationship. I had a lot of fun doing it, and it got me to Vermont.
And I understand that you also had a career with Fairpoint Communications, and you were involved in some of the organizing efforts within Fairpoint. Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I took on the role as a steward way back when it was let's see. We had so many iterations of the phone company, and I think it was during the just prior to Bell Atlantic taking over or being renamed, and I became a steward and represented our workforce in disputes with contracts, management and personnel conflicts, and also in contract negotiations on the local level. So it was a very interesting sideline to what was a pretty demanding customer service job.
So once you're here in Vermont, when did you start becoming involved in political advocacy here?
That's a good question. I think I managed my career without getting entangled in local or regional politics. And it wasn't until I got involved with the Pride Center in Burlington, Vermont. I looked at some of the things that were going on around the community, and it was just kind of a natural fit to advocate for the LGBTQ community and to speak out on some of the issues. It wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years before I retired that I became very active within that community, and it was, as they say, all downhill from there.
So as an extension of your advocacy with the Pride Center of Vermont, you became involved with the Lgbtqia Alliance of Vermont, which was a new advocacy group that was founded in 2017. And you became part of the liaison team, which meant that you would be advocating in the legislature with the state government infrastructure. What was attractive about that position in that process for you?
Well, I'd say working with you is one of the incentives, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there were things that needed to get done. And part of it was, and I think the group recognized quite clearly and early that we had a change in our federal administration. We had something happen that we didn't think was going to happen, but it did. And we already had been telegraphed how many things were going to change and what the ramifications were of having somebody who may not be LGBTQ friendly in the White House. And with that, I think we approached the legislature at that point with the eye on watching for things to deteriorate. And in fact, you and I worked very diligently to make sure language and things were proper in the legislature. Before we even became involved in issues, we were watching what laws were being passed and making sure that they were inclusive and they had inclusive language. So we started off slow, and then I got into some really groundbreaking legislation, and I was happy to be part of that.
So from being involved, advocating with the legislation and working with state government, you also started increasing your involvement in local and community politics. Could you share a bit about what it is that you've been doing in your own backyard and what the response of the community has been?
Thanks, Keith. That's interesting, and I'm just going to backtrack a little bit because during my involvement with the LGBTQI Alliance, there's a gubernatorial race that I became very involved in. It was 2018, and part of that was because of my knowledge of the community and that the candidate was the first nationally recognized national party recognized candidate for a state government, and she was transgender, Christine Hallquist. So I was very fortunate to be right place, right time to move her along. Well, that kind of devolved after the election and went right back into what we had been doing in the State House. But then I also reflected a little bit more on, well, I'm doing this here. Why am I not doing it in my backyard? Why am I not taking care of business around town? And it led eventually, of course, to me running for select board. I lost my first election there, but I did get elected as a justice of the peace. Part of it is taking the knowledge that I gained in Montpelier and bringing it down to a local level and implementing some of the things that I had heard people were looking for in my town. Basically, they were looking for transparency and better communications with town government. And I began attending the select board meetings and trying to understand the processes that were there.
So what were some of the things that came before the select board for which you had a unique perspective, or what were some of the things that were unexpected for you?
No, that's a good question. I think that the things that were in my wheelhouse, so to speak, were telecommunications and things that had to do with the land. I gained a forestry degree back in college many years ago. And from an application standpoint, if you haven't noticed, Vermont is mostly trees and dirt roads. And one of the things that, yeah, there you go. And one of the things that I recognized was property is valued in several ways. Part of it is whether it was agriculturally viable or whether it had forest land on it. And of course, in Bakersfield, maple syrup is a huge product. Sap from the trees is something that traditionally has been one of the off-season farm events. I'd have to say it's now full-blown supporting a lot of our local economy with both the labor and the processing of maple syrup. So part of it is understanding that global warming is affecting our trees and our ability to have our maples to be healthy, but also that it affects the community in earnings and seasons that are slow for sap. May or may not be in our future, but right now managing their field, their crops of maple trees is very important. It's something that I brought from my educational background. Also, when I was looking around and I saw the number of trees lining our roads that had been planted decades ago, and some of them were dying, we need to replace them. We need to have progressively work towards managing our own trees along our roadways and things of that nature. So it was kind of interesting to apply that. Besides myself, there's two other people who are graduates from forestry colleges on the select board. So it was nice to have a meeting or merging of the minds, so to speak, because we kind of all have the same background, but different in personalities. So I enjoyed getting to know.
Now, building off your role as a select board member, you're also your community's zoning administrator, and you've been involved in the regional effort to expand broadband. So could you talk a little bit about those two roles?
Sure. And the interesting part was they both happened almost simultaneously with regard to the Northwest Fiberworks, which is, of course, the Northwest Communications Union District, as well as taking on zoning responsibilities. That's kind of a default job. Had I not picked that work up, it would have fallen on the select board. Nobody really wanted to take that work up. So I said, hey, I can do this work. I can learn the work. And it's been an educational roller coaster going through both the state regulations and, of course, the local regulations, understanding what and who is responsible for permits and zoning. And a lot of it has been seat of the pants learning, because I have a wonderful town clerk. The institutional knowledge that she has, it's going to be gone when she leaves. And you find that folks who have been in town government for a long time, that's what happens, is they have nobody to carry it on or carry it on to. So I've been getting as much of an education from her as I ever did in college, which is kind of great. And the Northwest Fiberworks actually was an extension of me on the select board, because they needed an extra representative for the town. Each town's supposed to have 2 representatives, and I just got volunteered into that position. And as it worked out, I knew a lot of the players in that, with Christine Hallquist, of course, being the chief executive for the Vermont Broadband Community Coalition, VBCC. And, so it was kind of fun to get back and visit things with her. Also, from a telecommunications standpoint, having worked for the phone company for over 20 years, and in telecommunications almost 30, I have a broad bit of knowledge. A lot of it is customer service, but you can't not be in the phone company and not understand infrastructure and how things work, because you have to explain that to people. So it's a natural role to be on there. Right now, I'm the chair of one of the subcommittees from the planning organization, and we aren't that busy yet, but we have material ordered, we have plans being made, we have poles being inventoried. So there's a lot of groundwork yet to do before the first fiber line goes up. But I like it. It's challenging, it's diverse, and we have a lot of towns in Franklin County right now. They're looking forward to this implementation. It's going to be good.
So what makes Brenda Churchill the ideal candidate to represent Franklin 6? And what are the key components of your campaign that reflect the needs of your community?
That's a great question, Keith. I think that this all combines to make me a very knowledgeable and understanding candidate, both from how the State House works and how local things dovetail or fit in with the government, whether it's local or state government. I think my background with in telecommunications regarding customers that really need this product. Low, what do I want to say? We have areas that are underserved, and the kids need to have internet to be able to go to school. We just came through a pandemic where many kids are feeling like they're behind, and their parents say they're behind because they didn't have a good way to complete their school years. We're coming out of the third school year of COVID protections, and I think understanding that the relationship between education, families, and internet is actually more important now than it ever was. Also, a lot of people chose to do business from home and work from home. My neighbor, she works from home, and she couldn't be happier, except that she now works where she lives and lives where she works. So it's a little stressful for her, but take that part of it, and the fact that I did work in customer service so much, I don't mind talking to people. In fact, I engage people all the time. One of the things that doesn't show up really brightly on my resume is the time I spent teaching skiing, teaching all levels of skiing to adults and kids. If you want to get good at talking to people, teach people, talk to them, be interactive, and make sure you understand what their needs are, see what their needs are, and then implement a plan to get them to improve. I think that's applicable to any part of government. Understanding what your student needs, or in this case, your constituents, is primary to being able to make a plan and move forward. I think that experience, plus my customer service experience and the telecom experience, and now local government, both in the zoning and the implementation of those zoning laws, plus select board issues in town. One of the surprises I think you wanted me to highlight was how intricate our physical network is with regard to roads. And who knew that roads would be one of the hottest topics here, along with ATVs and ATV traffic. And that totally surprised me. As an avid off-road enthusiast, because I got my Jeeps, I certainly want to preserve both my neighborhood, my neighbors' security and privacy, and also meet the needs of recreation. Without recreation, why do you live if you don't get to go skiing or ride your ATV? These are two sports that are critical to tourism in Vermont. So I think when you look at income, revenue, peace of mind, peace and quiet around your home, there's a lot to do here. Make sure that we ensure that.
And with that, I need to say thank you and good luck on becoming the next representative from Franklin 6.
As you probably know, it's not luck, but hard work. So I'm fortunate to have a good team. And I thank you, Keith, for the opportunity to talk to all my communities, which are all very important to me. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with a very distinguished, exciting ensemble, the cast and director of Shakesqueer's production of Romeo and Juliet that's coming up to theaters and online in the near future. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Ann.
Well, individually, we have before you Molly McElroy, who is the director of drama and intrigue. We have actors Lex Johnston, Petra Gates, Alexa Pony Gabriel, and Susan Lloyd. Welcome, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
It's great to see you on this lovely afternoon. Let's get right to it. Let me ask you at the outset how this project started.
Absolutely. I can start us off there. This project, we've been talking about it a lot, in that we have been standing on the shoulders of some really delicious history of underground queer performance theater and queer performance art in central Vermont, and beyond. Part of our project is inspired by Shakesqueer theater in Tucson, Arizona. And so we have some crossover of cast and crew members from that Shakesqueer theater in Tucson that are a part of our production. And yeah, we're really excited to be developing this new theater project. This is our very first year.
Well, I looked it up and discovered that there's a Shakespeare anthology that was published in 2011 by some queer theorists. And then I saw that there was a production in Oregon, a Shakespeare production. So have you read that book, or are you in coordination with those other groups, or are you just independent?
Right now, we're mostly in connection with Shakespeare Tucson, and also really excited about the idea of connecting with all of these national groups that are doing really cool rural Shakespeare, and coming together to, figure out like, what are the ways that we are all doing something similar? What are the ways that we are doing different things? It's exciting to be a part of something larger than ourselves, and something that's not just this project, but it's connected to many different things.
Well, let me ask you, what values guide you as a group, would you say? Anyone?
Well, I can say when we first started meeting, there were some discussions about shared values and suggestions of kind of ground rules or guidelines that we talked about. And I don't have the list right here in front of me, so folks chime in. But I do think a couple of the really important things are, self-care, trying to be involved in such a complex project that involves so many people and moving parts. It's just there's a lot of opportunity for feeling, having all kinds of feelings, feeling burned out, feeling all these sort of things. So making sure that everyone's taking care of themselves is really key. And that also allows us to try to take care of each other as well. So those are two of the really important things.
One of the ones that I remember is have fun. And also one of the things I appreciated is being anti-perfect. So allowing ourselves to really just be in the roles and be in this community of other people that are kind of nerdy about Shakespeare, and kind of accept that we may not always get it right, but we're all in this together. And I thought that was really cool, like, because I struggle with perfection.
As do I. As do a lot of us.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm interrupting, but I do have the list right here because I am like I'm like side by side listing. But I like the way we were popping in with things that like really spoke to us. So yeah, like anti-perfection was mentioned. And then on our list here too, we have accessibility and transformative versus transactional, which was a big one for me in terms of like something important that I feel like has been really important within this like theater community is like kind of undoing like white supremacy culture within our theater group, which has been really cool, especially since like most of the people in our theater group do identify as white, and like kind of undoing that like white culture perfection, transactional, like how do we capitalize off of what we're giving, has like been really healing, I think, for me and a lot of other folks in ways that we like I show up to practice and how we kind of move with each other. It's been really, really wonderful. And that goes into our next value, which was flow and emergence. And I think being able to look at anti-perfection and transformational type of work has allowed us to like explore that flow and emergence. And I'm going to do a little shout out to Molly here real quick, because on our last rehearsal, there was kind of a lot of stuff we had to like navigate, and we talked really beautifully about like, okay, we have to make some drastic changes to what we're rehearsing tonight. And Molly did a beautiful job of like navigating that shift. And what could have been a very stressful evening was like worked through and was like really, really wonderful. So that has been very cool and beautiful to experience. So
What kind of drastic changes?
Well, we've been dealing with some absences from COVID, certainly. We're still in a pandemic, and we have been navigating that the entire time since we started our auditions of how do we get together and do that safely, not only for the people involved in the actual physical room, but all of our families and our coworkers and our community members who are vulnerable. And so we've been talking about that a lot. And yeah, what Lex was talking about the other night, we had some absences due to COVID exposure, or the flu that's going around right now. So we're really seeing the way that I think all of us have experienced a radical shift in the way that we are interacting in groups because of the pandemic. We've also been dealing with that at Shakesqueer, Vermont.
Mm-hmm. Alexa, Pony, which you want to be called?
Pony sounds fun.
Pony, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, I think the value around accessibility and inclusivity speaks loudly to me, particularly around COVID. I think we just made a decision to be masked while we're rehearsing, and made some pretty clear protocols on what it looks like for us to be able to be unmasked during Tech Week and performances, which helps me be able to show up in community, knowing that I'm vulnerable. I work with young children. There's lots of people I'm concerned to keep safe. And I'm really proud of us for choosing different venues that have different points of access, whether that's like physical accessibility with wheelchair access, or outdoor accessibility for people who don't want to be inside with groups of people. And of course, the online performance is accessible to people who, are grandmas across the country, or people who really are not going inside or outside with other folks. It seemed like a really big part of I guess COVID accessibility was a really big question, and how we wanted to make the show accessible for performers and for the audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So these are all reasons that you're very excited about this show. Is that correct? That sort of X's out my planned question. So let me go to why Romeo and Juliet. I think you have 38 options or 37 plays, however many.
Absolutely. Well, it's kind of in conjunction with our connection to Shakesqueer Tucson. So right before the pandemic, Shakesqueer Tucson was about to perform Romeo and Juliet. And during Tech Week, they had the shutdown, stay home, stay safe, beginning of quarantine. So they were not able to perform that show. And one of our cast members, Elsa, who was playing Romeo in our production, she was also cast as Romeo in that production 2 years ago. So it was part of the closing the loop of like, hey, let's bring Shakesqueer to Vermont. Let's see what kind of community can rally around this. And when we were in the beginning stages of discussion, we were deciding between Midsummer Night Dream and Romeo and Juliet. And, we decided to go with Romeo and Juliet. And part of that process was closing the loop for Elsa of, coming back around to this show, which, she wasn't sure that she was going to be cast as Romeo when we started Romeo, this production of Romeo and Juliet. And Shakesqueer Tucson just performed their version of Romeo and Juliet about a month or two ago. So there's that piece. There's also the piece around our excitement to adapt this story. Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy, and it's, a heterosexual tragedy. So in terms of queering this up, we also are asking questions around what does it mean to have grief and what does it mean to have grief in community? What does it mean to imagine a different ending that doesn't involve teen suicide, especially when we're dealing with queer theater and queer storytelling?
Absolutely. How would you describe theater in Vermont? I presume you've been here for a while, most of you. No?
Well, I mean, I could say as someone who grew up in the Northeast Kingdom and was involved in youth theater, it's something that wasn't a big part of my life for a long time. I moved back to Vermont about 10 years ago, and I have friends who are involved in theater, and I've certainly been a theater goer. So I guess from I'm feeling very fresh to it as a participant. And so whatever description I would have of participating in making and creating theater and creating drama with other people would be very much based on this wonderful group of people who are so kind and welcoming. And that I think that's, you know, that's all I think I have to say about theater in Vermont at the moment.
I know, it's a broad question. How about the rest of you?
Well, and I would say that as a person that was involved with Vermont Pride Theater for many years, and you've also interviewed us on many occasions, there was a certain sadness that ended. So this is a good segue into also why are you here? But what excites me about this is I feel like this group we've kind of passed the baton from the Chandler's Pride Summer Series to this new group that's really passionate about carrying the torch forward. So that has been really cool. And I think there's a mixed bag in terms of Vermont theater. You know, I'm involved with the theater in my hometown over in the Mad River Valley, and we do our best to be inclusive and to offer different offerings, everything from musicals to bands to weddings, things come through, but to have this kind of fresh show with people so passionate about making a difference and their advocacy and doing something. And I love the whole gay, the LGBTQ queer angle of Romeo and Juliet. We had a conversation as a cast. How many of us watch old movies and, you know, fantasize about the main character being of a different gender or no gender or non-binary or gender fluid or something different than what we're seeing on the screen? So to have an opportunity to play with that in real life, I think is really exciting. And I'm hoping that this group grows and continues to do good work and reaches out to other theaters and, you know, can put a traveling show together and really make a difference. I would love that. Just, you know, pipe dream of mine. No big deal.
Petra, I'm sorry, Susan. Petra, are you new to Vermont?
No, I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom.
Oh, you said that. I'm sorry.
Seventh generation of my family to grow up in the same town. But I moved away for a very long time and moved back to Vermont and moved to Central Vermont just about almost exactly 10 years ago.
Lex, are you new to Vermont?
Yeah, I would say that I'm like pandemic new. Like I literally moved here March 2020. So it has been, yeah, I don't know too much about theater in the area aside from this group. I actually was talking to somebody, maybe, I think it might've been Molly, just about like these random opera houses, because we had this wonderful opportunity to see JAG theater production in White River Junction. Wonderful, like that is like, thankfully, like the theater I know of in Vermont, like this group in JAG, which I feel like is maybe my like only need at this point, which is wonderful. But we were in going and seeing that production that was at the Briggs Opera House. And we were talking about like all of these little opera houses that just exist in all of these little towns. And I was so confused because, yeah, I'm not from here, and I'm from the Southwest, and in New Mexico specifically. We don't have like all of these little theaters in all of these little towns. And so it was really interesting to hear about that and be like, oh, like that is a thing that is happening in these small communities. And like Marshfield and Plainfield, and that there are just like pockets of theater around Vermont that do certain things. So that was really cool. But yeah, I'm not from the area, so still learning about theater here.
Well, let's turn to Pony then. How long have you been in Vermont?
I think it's been about 8 years at this point. I came in January, which was a wild moment. But when I think about theater in Vermont, I think about Bread and Puppet as the very Vermont theater company. You know, kind of like unabashedly political and DIY and very inclusive, which I think is shakesqueer is like a little more keyed in, maybe. Like, you know, we don't have big open shows where anyone can perform in the band, but I think there is definitely an element of like political commentary and rewriting narratives that we're working with that feels connected there. And I think, yeah, Bread and Puppet seems to have a pretty big value around accessibility too. You know, so that's the kind of Vermont theater that I think of. And similar to Petra, and I think a lot of other folks in the cast, the last time I was in a theater production, like a play, was in high school, which was West Side Story, but like my high school went bananas for West Side Story. I was in the choral role, but it's kind of fun to kind of like have a nod to that production come back with Romeo and Juliet.
Let's step back and talk about when the show is going to occur and where and what's sold out and how people can get tickets and so forth.
Absolutely. So our opening night is June 3rd, Friday. So that's 2 weeks from now, or a week and a half from now. And so we're June 3rd and June 4th. We are at the Plainfield Opera House. The shows are at 7 p.m. Doors are at 6. That Sunday, June 5th, is going to be our Shakesqueer in the Park. We're performing at the Tuning Forks stage at Hubbard Park. And that's a matinee show at 2 p.m. The next week, we have a show at the Old Labor Hall in Barrie on June 10th. That's a Friday. That show is sold out currently. And then that Sunday is our interactive virtual performance. Unlimited tickets are available for that show. We will have closed captioning. And that is going to be on Sunday, June 12th at 4 p.m. And all of this information is available on our ticket site, which I think we're going to share.
Very good. Very good. Well, that's how I tried to get tickets, and two of my choices were sold out. So I'm going to go to the virtual show. And I guess that's another question. Did you have to do a whole new rehearsal to go virtual?
So we're working with our wonderful friend, Julia Wilk, who is going to be videotaping our dress rehearsal. So often in theater, you have an invited dress rehearsal where you invite people to come, and it acts as a like, all right, let's get show ready. For this production, we're going to be doing that with a filmed dress rehearsal, and then we're going to live stream that on Twitch.
Very impressive, very high tech. You're also affiliated with Central Vermont Pride. Tell us how that happened to come about and the connection there.
Well, that's an exciting connection that I was thinking about when you were asking the question of, you know, what do we think about Vermont theater and what does Vermont theater mean to us? We have a connection with our dear friend and comrade, Kel Arbor, who is the director at the Pride Center and is organizing Pride in Central Vermont with Elaine Ball. And so we've known Kel. Kel did the cabarets, and that is something that I think of when I think of performance art and theater in Central Vermont. And, you know, from the very beginning, when we said, hey, we're going to do Shakesqueer Vermont, Kel reached out right away and wanted to be involved. And when they heard the timing of it, they were like, well, I'm totally booked at that point, but let me know what I can do to help. And they're, you know, so yeah, they just, you know, had invited us to meetings and let us know how to get involved and how to get on the calendars. And they're putting together a really incredible event for Central Vermont Pride this year. And we're really delighted to be a part of Montpelier Pride, as well as opening up for the Central Vermont Drag Ball, which is that second weekend in June on the 12th. They're having the drag ball at the Old Labor Hall, and Kel asked us if we would open the night before on Friday. So it all came about from the very start in conjunction with Kel and their vision for, June Games.
I love Cal. I think they might be Director of Communications at the Pride Center.
Thank you.
And they have a strong history in Central Vermont too, which is why we're excited that they're going to be at the Pride Center. And they are the source of this interview because I think they reached out to our co-host Keith, and the rest is history. Here we are. Well, now we have a little time, so maybe we can step back and talk about you individually. Presumably you all have lives apart from the theater. Can you tell us how you got involved with drama and what your attitude is toward theater and what you do in your other lives? Not to fragment you, but let's start with Pony.
All right. Well, yeah, like I said, the last big play I was in high school. Oh, I have a cat here.
Oh,
Hello,
wonderful. An enhancement.
And I think maybe in college I was involved in like an improv troupe, which was really fun for me. I love to play. In my other life, I run a childcare program. So I really like play is a big part of what brings me a lot of joy in life. And it's so fun to be with a group of adults who know how important play is. Yeah. And when I heard about shakesqueer, I just kind of like knew that I wanted in some way. Yeah, I just feel so excited to be an actor in the show. I feel like I have a role that's not too many lines to memorize, but I get to use a sword, which is really fun for me.
What is your role?
I play Benvolio.
Oh,
Yeah, who is a cousin to Romeo, kind of one of the Montague crew, a little bit of a rabble rouser.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of a peacemaker, a little bit of both at the same time.
That's great. Petra.
Well, as I think I mentioned a little bit before, I was really involved in youth theater in Vermont, in a kind of Connecticut Valley, straddling Vermont, New Hampshire-based group called Green Mountain Youth Theater. And I do think that my becoming involved in that at the age of 16 or 17 probably literally saved my life. It was the first time that I met kids who were queer kids who were out. Had a theater director who was a gay man who was out, and it was really transformational for me. And I would say maybe almost as important as that was something that you were mentioning, Pony, which is that playful being able to improvise with people, to play, which goes back to what Lex was referring to, of letting go of some of this socialization around perfection, just widening the scope of possibility. For me, that was extremely transformational. And I did a lot of other theater with various groups as a teenager, and have done a lot of music performance in my adult life. But this is my first time getting back to theater, and it feels really very much like coming home to family. And now I'm feeling verklempt, but it's a very sweet thing. And in my sort of I work a 40-hour a week job, providing IT support to a couple public schools. But I think in a larger sense, I'm really interested in narrative, how we shape narrative and how it in turn shapes us. And so I feel honored to have the opportunity to be part of this wonderful group of people who are very deliberately, intentionally creating that together. And it was just a chance that I happened to hear about this. I should throw that in there. I think Pony was at my house and talking to one of my housemates, who is another cast member, And they said, I think I heard shakesqueer, and I think I almost broke my neck turning my head so fast and looking, and I was like, what? And that was 2 days before the auditions. And then I was like, I have to be there and be part of that. And so luckily for me, I am part of that. And I'm playing nurse. Juliet's nurse is my role, which is is the role I wanted. So I feel lucky and privileged.
Well, you're also the fight choreography consultant.
That is true. That happened.
That's an up and coming field.
It is. And I will say I don't have experience choreographing stage combat, but I'm a martial arts teacher with quite a few years of training. So we're trying to adapt and see what's helpful and what's constructive.
Lex.
Yeah, as somebody who is in almost every fight scene, because I'm playing Tybalt, who is just full of rage and anger, and yeah, Petra's doing an incredible job adapting. This has been wonderful. Exhausting, but wonderful. Anyway, back to the question. I have mostly done like musical theater and not too many like stage dramas. And I heard about this through Molly, and was like very excited about it, because I had started getting like pretty frustrated with like trying to figure out, there had been the pandemic, obviously. So this is my first like kind of role since then. But prior to that was getting frustrated with the like lack of gender diverse roles in musical theater and theater in general, and kind of just being like, if I want to be involved with this, I have to like perform this way or this certain way. And it's been really nice to not have to do that in this group at all. So that's been really incredible experience, to not have any of those pressures put on me. I think I forgot what the question is. Why did we get and how did we get involved?
What's your other,
this?
what do you do in your other?
Oh, yeah. A regular job. I'm a respiratory therapist. I work in a hospital in the Upper Valley. So that's what I do on my little normal day job.
How about Susan?
Well, so little bits and pieces of what everybody said, really. I saw this on the Vermont Theater Network Facebook group page, and I have always wanted to do Shakespeare. And a couple of years ago, I got the opportunity to do the Scottish play more than once. We did it in a park in New Hampshire, which was super fun. And I got to play 6 different parts, men, women, gender, indeterminate. And then we did it a second time in a Halloween showing at the Chandler in Randolph, and I played 6 other parts. So I feel pretty well-rounded in terms of that particular play. So when I saw this combining the queer angle and Shakespeare, I was like, I have to do this. And my day job, I work for Washington County Mental Health, and we're actually a sponsor of the Central Vermont Pride, and we got all our rainbow progress flag stickers in the other day. So I'll be at a booth at the State House in Montpelier and in Barrie. With my day job, we're both recruiting people and helping people with mental health issues. So I will have a clinician and a recruiter with me sitting at the table. And so it's really cool when all your worlds come together in a good way. Mm-hmm. And I've had the same experience as you have, Lex, where it's been very frustrating. I've been in a lot of musicals and plays, and I almost always get cast as a man, and that's fine. But it's nice to play myself and not have to decide or pick a gender or pick a team or feel uncomfortable. So,
Molly, you're the director and we've neglected you. Are you from Vermont? How did you get involved with this, and what drew you to theater, and what do you have a job outside of theater?
Yes, thank you, Anne. I am not from Vermont. I am from, I moved around a lot. I was born in Arizona, but I grew up in Pennsylvania in Chester County, and I moved to Vermont a little over 4 years ago in 2017. And my sister lives up here. So that's what drew me up here. She was a farmer in the Northeast Kingdom for a long time. And I used to come up and visit her in the summers and just fell in love with Vermont. And so when I was looking for somewhere to move, I chose Montpelier. And that was in 2017. And as far as theater goes, I have been on the stage in some way or form since I was a small child at 3 or 4. I was in all the high school and middle school musicals and plays. I was a part of theater club. I went to, my first year of college was at Columbia College in Chicago, and I really wanted to be on Broadway. That was my dream and my goal and my vision. And then I realized that I didn't want to be auditioning for my job for the rest of my life, that I wanted a little bit more security than that. So yeah, I switched into more community theater. I've always been excited about theater, and I'm a part of another Central Vermont theater project called Playback Theater, Central Vermont Playback Theater, and I co-direct that troupe with Lucy Schmid. So that, you know, that led me to being in a position where when Leslie, Connor, Elsa, and Larkin, 4 of our cast members, got together in the winter, over the winter last year, and they said, let's finally do this. Let's bring shakesqueer together. And they said, great, but none of us want to direct. Who could do it? Leslie is in Central Vermont Playback Theater with me and said, let's ask Molly, maybe she'll do it. And so I'm just delighted. This is a dream opportunity for me to get to work with actors and pull a show together and direct a scripted, adapted play. It's just been fabulous. And my day job, I'm an entrepreneur. I run Kitchen Witch cleaning services in Central Vermont, and I used to be a co-owner at Woodbelly Pizza. So lots of projects in my belt. I'm a project babe, and I love making things and bringing things together. And it's, again, just an incredible joy to work with all these folks. We have a cast of 20 people and we have a crew of 20 people. So it's a very large project that is a lot of fun.
Playback is a large project with a cast of 20.
No, so I was talking about shakesqueer, but Playback Theater is a small group. There's 9 of us.
Aha. So there are 20 in this show.
Yes.
We have just a small sample of the cast. You're very illustrious and smart, all of you. I can't wait to see it. Let's talk about what's next. Are you going to stay together and do more Shakespeare or do more other things? And are you looking for a building or a permanent venue, or what's next?
Yeah, we are, from the very beginning, we've been excited that this would be an annual project. So what's next is we are talking about a next year. The idea is that it would be around the same time. We had auditions in March. We had rehearsals in April and May, and a show in June. That could change, but it is something that we're excited about. And really what's next is just the unfolding emergence of this project. We're not looking for a building at the moment. We're really grateful for the community effort. The Quaker Meeting House in Plainfield has been warm and welcoming and letting us rehearse there. The different venues all around, the Plainfield Opera House, the Old Labor Hall, Hubbard Park. It's such a community endeavor and such a community event. I imagine we'll stay in that vein and in that direction for the foreseeable future. And yes, more Shakesqueer productions. Very excited about that.
So another production next year. What about in between?
We don't have plans for anything in between. I think this production really, the container expanded really fast into something that was so big for a first year run. And I think we feel, I can speak for myself, I feel simultaneously grateful and stunned at the energy and excitement behind this project. It's amazing. And also I'm looking forward to a little bit of rest, a little bit of reflection, and some intention about moving forward and what's next for Shakesqueer.
Well, we'd love to have you on again when you formulate more concrete plans, both individually and collectively. Are there any last words you want to leave the audience with? See the show?
I was gonna say, come see the show.
All right. Well, the cast and director of Romeo and Juliet, Shakesqueer, thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure and fun.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Anne.
Good to
Thank
see
you
you.
so much.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, remember, resist.